Welcome to Words by Luke James, and a YouTube channel dedicated to some of the topics that I find interesting. Over the weeks ahead, I'm going to be talking about British and American politics, but also football and ice hockey too. And the thing that I wanted to start on today, kind of on Sunday the 17th of January, was to ask the question, are West Ham good? Because after 18 matches, the Hammers are currently 9th in the Premier League. They've won 8 matches, drawn 5, lost 5, scored 25 and conceded 21. So that puts them on 29 points with a positive 4 goal difference. And over the last 5 matches, their form's been really interesting under David Moyes. They lost 3-0 at Stamford Bridge against Chelsea, perhaps not that surprisingly. A 2-2 draw versus Brighton at home at the London Stadium was followed up with a 0-0 draw away at Southampton. Most recently, however, 1-0 wins back-to-back against Everton, with Thomas Souček scoring the goal for West Ham, and also yesterday a 1-0 win against Burnley at the London Stadium. Of course, it was Mikel Antonio with the goal on that occasion. Sandwiched between those two 1-0 wins, of course, West Ham had another 1-0 win over Stockport County in the FA Cup. And the reason why I'm asking the question, are West Ham any good, is simply because I don't think West Ham are as good as people think they might be. I think at the moment people are still saying that there's plenty more for this West Ham side to give, and that's where I have my doubts. I don't dispute the idea that West Ham are very much a firmly mid-table team in the Premier League, and I think around 9th position is probably where West Ham will peak for the season and perhaps finish towards the end of the season. My point simply is that West Ham shouldn't expect to go any higher than they currently are. And the reason for that is quite simple. If you look at the squad that lined up yesterday against Burnley at home, it was Fabianski in goal, a back four of Cresswell, Ogbonna, Dawson and Soufal. In midfield you had Declan Rice, Thomas Souček protecting the back four, with Pablo Fornals on the left, Ben Rama in the centre and Jared Bowen out on the right hand side. Up front, perhaps unsurprisingly, Mikel Antonio once again was leading the line for David Moyes. Simply the reason I kind of pick out this team in particular and the starting lineup that they used yesterday is this. It's a good team. I think it's an okay team, certainly by Premier League standards. But if you look at the bench, there aren't many options that David Moyes feels particularly comfortable using, and I think the most obvious example of this is up front. Kind of earlier this week, David Moyes kind of sanctioned the sale of Sebastian Haller to Ajax. That transfer aside, and kind of the reason why that transfer is so disappointing is because it came at a £25 million loss for West Ham. Kind of, if you park that thought for a moment, the reason why the transfer of Haller is so underwhelming, concerning perhaps, is because it leaves Antonio as the only senior striker at the club. And even when I say that, we're working on the active assumption that Antonio is an out-and-out striker, which for most of his career, he was a winger. So squad depth is an issue for West Ham, and I think the other important thing to remember about the squad at the moment is how old it is and how very few of the players kind of playing an active role at the minute are in their prime. So this chart that I made for an article that I'm currently working on shows position by position the age and length of time each player has been at the club for West Ham in the 2020-21 season. So the bottom of the line represents the time, kind of the age at which the player joined West Ham. The top of the line represents the player's current age. So for Mark Noble, for example, he made his West Ham debut at age 19. He's currently 33 years old, hence the line goes from the top of the graph to the bottom of the graph. Now, the important thing to bear in mind about this, and I think I'll go through position by position, in goal West Ham have a serious problem in terms of the future, because Fabianski is now 35. Darren Randolph was sold by the club because West Ham didn't believe him to be kind of a Premier League first choice calibre goalkeeper, and of course Martin certainly isn't that. So in terms of the line of succession in goal, West Ham need to recruit someone or promote Nathan Trott, for example. At left back, there are similar issues. So I've put Aaron Cresswell down as a left back because that's where he's currently playing with Masuaku out, and of course that's where he spent most of his career, kind of including his time at Ipswich Town. Cresswell has been a really good servant to West Ham. He's currently 30 though, and he's kind of towards the back end of his career. Masuaku has plenty of good years ahead of him if he can stay injury-free. What I should mention as well, the band across the middle of this chart shows kind of the prime age range for Premier League footballers, so it's from 25 to 29. Again, looking in defence, Ogbonna is 32, is kind of beyond his prime. Balbuena is now 29, he's about to go beyond his prime. Craig Dawson is on a season-long loan from Watford, he's 30 years old and is of course beyond his prime. Issa Diop joined kind of a couple of seasons ago, much aplomb, and played really well in his first season, but is currently struggling to beat kind of Craig Dawson into the position on the starting lineup, so that's a problem for him, and that's another reason why it's a little bit complicated to see kind of where this West Ham team goes in the future. Further up the pitch, there are similar issues. Mark Noble is the only senior central midfield backup to Thomas Souček and Declan Rice. Likewise, Mikel Antonio is the only striker on the books at the moment, excluding players kind of to be promoted from the youth teams. And the reason why I think this is so problematic for West Ham is just because players like Antonio get injured all the time. I mean, yesterday against Burnley, it was the first time that Antonio started in the Premier League since November. It isn't inconceivable that next weekend Antonio could pick up an injury and he'd be out for a couple of weeks. If that were to happen, David Moyes would have a really tricky decision to make, because we've already seen that he isn't particularly fond of players like Yarmolenko, for example. And then it's a question of who would he put up front, perhaps Jared Bowen to make the most of his pace, but then you don't really have an option to play out on the right-hand side because, as I said, Yarmolenko isn't really a David Moyes type player. And all of this kind of comes in the context of a changing system for West Ham. So David Moyes went from a 5-4-1, which was very defensive and quite solid on occasion, to this 4-2-3-1, which is a little bit more progressive, but of course has issues of its own too. And the reason why I'm a little bit concerned about West Ham isn't because of the next 5 games they've got coming up, and it isn't because I think kind of the results of the last 5 weeks have been a mirage. I think this West Ham team is pretty good, but they're not excellent. And if we look to the next 5 games, West Ham play West Brom at home, Doncaster Rovers at home in the FA Cup, Crystal Palace away in the Premier League, followed by matches at home against Liverpool and away against Aston Villa. Quite simply, West Ham should beat West Brom. On current form, West Ham kind of have better results. West Brom are struggling at the bottom end of the Premier League, although of course yesterday they did have a fantastic result away at Wolverhampton Wanderers. Doncaster Rovers in the FA Cup, again, that's a game West Ham should be winning, especially if they have ambitions to go to the latter stages of the competition, and it's worth bearing in mind that a 5th round match against either Liverpool or Manchester United awaits the winner of this tie. The most important games for West Ham in this run of fixtures, though, are against Crystal Palace, who are in mid-table, I think they're around 13th, and Aston Villa, who are currently 10th, having played, I think, 3 less games at the time of recording than West Ham. If West Ham can get back-to-back away victories against Palace and Villa, that will be a huge statement of intent, and perhaps I was wrong about West Ham not being that good. However, if the form is a little bit patchy, especially against Villa, I think it's probably fair to imagine that West Ham will end up pretty much around where they currently are towards the end of the season. This is a team that is good, but this isn't a team that are excellent. And I think that's where I'm going to leave this first episode of Words by Luke James. If you enjoyed it, please do subscribe, like, all that stuff. And also you can find me on Twitter at LukeJames_32. If you enjoyed this, I also run a politics podcast called Midfield Politic, and you'll be able to find that on pretty much any podcast platform. That's enough for today. I hope you enjoyed this video about West Ham, and until next time, see you soon.